Hey guys, this is Valde from Moji here. Danish Counter-Strike is one hell of a drug, but so is Thorin's YouTube channel.
This video is brought to you thanks to GamerSupps, or at least you could buy some GamerSupps and make it worth my while and yours. You could get 10% off using the code Thorin, Thorin, at gamersupps.gg. I enjoy flavours like Guacamole Gamer Fart 9000. It's just strawberry and lime. Lemonade, the name says it all, just a refreshing lemonade flavour. Blue Raz is blue raspberry. If you know that flavour, the chemical flavour of blue raspberry, you are going to immediately recognise that one if you try it. Cherry limesicle is an underrated one. I don't see anyone ever mention, but I think it's actually really delicious if you like sweet flavours. Now then, former Heroic and Team Liquid in-game leader and AWP in those teams, cadiaN, has joined Astralis, and he will be replacing Bro in the starting lineup. He will be the in-game leader instead of Device, but Device will AWP instead of cadiaN, and cadiaN will actually become a rifler. So if anyone knows, I always start when I do my breakdowns of player roster transfers, etc., with the person removed. So since the person removed, at the moment, he's just removed from the starting line. But let's be real, it looks like they're just going to move him on and keep this lineup. Although, by the way, I think they would be smart, as a quick caveat at the beginning, to keep Bro, keep him on the bench for a few months, see how it goes with Stair, and if this lineup even works in general, and have the option to potentially swap him back in. Because even though Stair looks like a much more skilled player with a much brighter future than Bro, difference is they play different roles and are clearly suited for different strengths. So I actually don't think that it's particularly appropriate to have Stair do Bro's roles. I actually think that's like some weird super team thinking where you can think anyone skilled can do like a less skilled player's roles, whereas actually Stair looks more suited to be like sort of like an entry pack player potentially. Whereas you look at Bro, he clearly, oh no, the other way around, sorry. I would say Bro is supposed to be like the space creator and then Stair's supposed to like come in after, whereas now I think he's just going to get forced himself to be the shitter who runs in and gets wrecked. Essentially, he's going to be on the duty that sort of like Cello was in fucking Furia, where he used to be really good on Imperial and then magically he's way worse on Furia because he fucked his roles up. So the key thing there is to watch that aspect. I would just keep him in the background personally. So the lineup now is going to be cadiaN, IGL, Device, AWP, Yabi and Stown. We're assuming Yabi's an entry player / playmaker and Stown is the lurker / rifler. And then Stair's now going to be just the space creator, we assume at this point in time, / supportive element along with cadiaN, right? Because we assume this means cadiaN gets to be like an entry player himself, although we'll get to that in a second. So in terms of the Bro removal, I don't hate that entirely on its surface. Like, he obviously isn't a top player. For me, he never should have been in Astralis. And I don't think, like, he has some crazy future where he would have become, like, your new Zipnix or some top talent like that. But I hate what it represents that you've kicked this guy now. Because as far as I can tell, you didn't kick him because he did anything wrong or didn't fit his roles, right? You signed him with all this BS that you're signing, like, a young, up-and-coming player. He's going to, like, gain experience. He's going to create space so that the other roles can be the stars and can shine. Okay, you did all that. Did they just not shine? I think they didn't at times, and therefore now you're fired. Like, I don't know why that's Bro's fault. The implication, by the way, is that because you had so much star power elsewhere, he didn't need to be a crazy fragger, so it doesn't matter that his numbers aren't great. So I would say, wasn't he doing his job? Like, was he the guy that you look at and go, that's why they're losing? I would say this reminds me, not as extreme, because I think Drop's better, of what they did to Drop in Furia, where his numbers were terrible because he was playing all the shit roles to allow others like Art and Yuri, etc., to be shining and to be stars. They then themselves wouldn't shine and be stars and lose the game. And everyone went, yeah, that fucking Drop. And then they kicked him and brought in someone, again, like a Stair to a Bro. They brought in a more skilled player in Cello, but he's not as good at the roles. And actually, not only is he not as good at the roles, but it takes away his skill because he's in roles that don't suit him. So then you kick Bro out, bench him, and you just force Stair to do another role swap. So before, he had to make space for Stown when Stown came in. Now he has to, cover Bro's roles so cadiaN could come in, someone who hasn't even been a good rifler ever in his career, and take over his spots so that as an IGL, because an IGL you typically don't want to be like way back, you want to be one of the people going in, don't you? To coordinate, we're going to have guy who's essentially not being an IGL as a rifler come in and just take the spot of a much more skilled player in Stair. Already I hate everything about that. I hate it for Bro. I even hate it for Stair. Like, at this point in time, we better get a lot out of the other players if this move's going to work. It's even implied, by the way, They say to themselves that like cadiaN will be like an entry player. He said it in his own statement, like he might be running in first or whatever, and that'll be in the pack a lot more at this point in time. Then we'll go to the cadiaN side. I hate this part as well. I actually think the cadiaN edition is the worst part of the whole fucking move. If you told me something else is happening, like they're bringing in Huxley and then they've had to make Stair go out and bro because they held the rope. Okay, I get that. That could maybe make sense. Although in that scenario, that's why I said if you get Huxley, I think unfortunately, even though Stair's good, you say, hey Stair, because I'm keeping Yabby and Stown, you're the one I'm going to have to bench or remove. I'm keeping Bro for his roles, and Huxley's going to be more of the... You could have done that role too, but you didn't. So for me, I just hate everything about this move. Like, if this was right after Heroic, although that doesn't make sense because the reason they all had to leave Heroic was because of the drama between them, so I guess that's impossible. But if this had just been that towards the end of CSGO, the news had come out that cadiaN, Stown and Yabby join for, Astralis, and then once they get there, you figure out the role. I'd have been really hyped. I would be like, fuck, this is dope. Like, imagine this move. This would be interesting. Likewise, by the way, if he'd have just joined now as an AWP IGL, look, I wouldn't be a fan of that, even though Device, by the way, I think could be a very good rifler. I wouldn't be as big a fan of him. But you know what? This might sound bizarre. I'd rather take cadiaN as an AWP IGL than as a rifler IGL, even now in CS2. Look, I think he's a way worse AWPer than Device in CS2, and I think he was always worse than him in CSGO anyway. He just doesn't play like a traditional star AWPer. But to me, as I'm going to get to, I think it's essential to how cadiaN thinks of the game and his whole fucking confidence in his style and his calling style. And I think without that AWP, you're just going to see he's just going to be a shadow of himself. That's my prediction. So look, if I actually have to pick which way I want these players to be composed, I would have gone the other way. I mean, apparently cadiaN implied it himself in the interview he did with Astralis that he wanted like, or maybe he said it in the news post, that he wanted like Device in the past to Heroic and he was thinking about it. That's the move I always wanted. I always wanted them in Heroic to just basically say to cadiaN and that team, now be a rifler, IGL, and then let's bring in Device, because you thought to yourself, what's the point in them going to Astralis? They're never going to have a really good lineup and they're never going to be anywhere close to before. Then we've got hopefully one of the best IGLs and we've got one of the best AWPers and the best player Denmark's ever produced. That's a really interesting lineup if you brought Device to Heroic. I mean, imagine the same lineup where you've got Yabby and Stown and then you've got Tesses, Shush and cadiaN, and then if you want to make it even spicier, that lineup alone can work. But imagine you take out Tesses to make room for Device, I guess, and then put cadiaN in Tesses' spot, Device AWPs. If Device actually is a true superstar AWP like he used to be a couple of years ago, I think it wouldn't matter that cadiaN's worse than Tesses. I think he could make that work because you just have the final oomph, the kick to actually get over the hump in the semis and the finals and win a major. Now, already on the cadiaN move, I hate the headline on the Astralis post. The Astralis post says that Astralis, quote, sign star player cadiaN as new IGL. Now, in what fucking universe is he a star player now? Sure, you could say, because we're only in September, they're using the logic that because he was a HLTV top 20 player, which he was, then they can claim that means he's a star, and therefore they're signing a star, or that he just has a star name. That's true, actually, he does have a star name, let's be real. In the modern day, even though he's nowhere near as great a player, actually, because of the work he's done on the mic and desks and in public and media, cadiaN actually will be remembered in this era in the same vein as the legends of the past eras of the fucking Get Rights and the Pashas and the Screams. Kenny S, Giant. It seems like actually he will be one of those names. It's one of the infuriating things if you talk to people who barely know CS, because, like, for example, during the online Coof era, there actually would be real people from games like League of Legends and Dota who I know who would tell me, like, oh, my favourite player is cadiaN. He is one of the best players in the world. And I was like, but he isn't. Like, that was just like a clutch online in like a Pro League mate. Like, he's like a good player, and it's more actually being an IGL, the captain. It's actually not him as the like star AWP. Like, you're missing it on that one. He's nowhere close to Simple and Zewu and the Ashiro and these fucking super stud players, Dexter even. But like, that's how much his name transcended CS and was getting like worldwide, and he was becoming one of the most like magnetic personalities in the game, wasn't he? Also, I'll just throw this out there. Another part that I think is an intense negative about this move is cadiaN is 29 years old. I think so is Device. Like, these guys are so fucking long in the tooth, and they both have 1 million hours of reps, by the way. They've both been playing the whole fucking time in CSGO, except Device when he had that like year off for anxiety or whatever it was, plus all that fucked up situation with his girlfriend and then sitting on the bench and all that shit. Aside from that, though, you've been putting in mad hours. So the idea you're going to make a lineup with two 29-year-olds, like, bro, isn't that already a negative about Falcons? That you have Snappy and you have fucking Dupree in the same lineup. Everyone else is saying the opposite. Like Kazads of the world are saying, let's go younger, let's get youth, let's get sharp players, people we can mould, people who can still develop, who have potential. So already the fact you're doing that means basically, aside from Stair, who you're absolutely just constantly pushing around into different, you take it as a square peg and shove it into a circular hole, then a star-shaped hole, and you're just doing that with. So if Stair's the one who's supposed to be able to get better and improve, how's that going to happen in this team? So I think if you look at this team, Stout and Yabby are known quantities. You're just hoping you can get them to the level they were at either early on in this Device IGL era or when they were in Heroic and they were really good and they were top 20 players. Then you hope Device can get really good again. That could happen. He could become like a top 5 player of the world. I think it's plausible. He's an all-time generational talent. He's fantastically good. He's really good in terms of work ethic and grinding and working on his mechanics and getting back. I think he was really good even as an IGL, as an AWPer. I just think it made his AWP game drop off a bit and it made him a little bit more stationary, and I don't think he was a good enough IGL. Look, I think cadiaN in Heroic was a better IGL than Device in Astralis. But to be fair, cadiaN in CS2 wasn't as good an IGL as cadiaN in Heroic in CS4 as an IGL or an AWPer for that matter. So that's part of the problem of doing the 1-for-1. We're in a different game, isn't it? So for me, the main issue I have to think about before I think about how this Astralis will work is an obvious one. It goes like this. It's how Heroic ended and the whole thing I know about Team Liquid, which I do know a bunch about. Like, by the way, I will do a video in the near future giving a load of the tea about what happened with cadiaN and Team. It's safe now. Everyone's moved on. The right people have been fired or let go, or the players have moved on to it. They've got a new lineup. They're all doing well. Now cadiaN's not even in the team anymore. He's not benched. There's no chance he can come back. Now I think it's safe to actually drop some of that info and there's some spicy bangers in there. By the way, if you don't know, I would probably suggest if you want a little hint, go check out Zeus's interview he did with HLTV.org. You can read a transcription there. He confirms that behind the scenes there was a big fight way back, I think he said in January or something. He confirmed that the team didn't buy an cadiaN system, and it's basically inferred that like he couldn't or wouldn't change and adapt to the players and personnel he had. He just kept trying to do his system. Basically, you could imagine him like Faker, just banging his head off the wall over and over again because he lost. No, whatever. That's a fucking harsh joke, but it is about something in the public consciousness. Also, Zeus did mention, little detail here, when you're all going to rave about twists. You know, you all say, hey, Twist said to get ultimate. Who, by the way, you were all flaming Team Liquid and Joker Steve for. You said that was Joker Steve's pickup when he was a random from AGO, and that means Joker Steve's a fraud and should be fired. But now that Ultimate's fragging out, you all say Twists picked him up, and that means Twists is a genius and brilliant at scouting. But you want to know a little detail that will absolutely pop that little bubble that you just built there of a narrative is Zeus himself mentions that when they were making this lineup, it was almost certain cadiaN was going to join, but they didn't know if Twists was joining because obviously he was in phase, they were winning, he had the offer from Vitality and some other teams, I heard Falcons, etc. So basically, Zeus just straight up says, I've never heard anyone mention this detail because it's an inconvenient fact, isn't it? Zeus says that Twists heard Skulls might join, Skulls from Pain, the one you all flamed and said was shit, and again, Joker Steve should be fired, or Zeus should be fired, or Team Liquid is a disgrace of an org for the deal they signed with Skulls, and he's a shitter and was never good. Apparently, Zeus says that Twist said, oh, if that kid's joining, then I'll join, or words to that effect. And that's part of why Twist joined Team Liquid. Didn't like them apples, did you? You don't like that medicine when it's about your favourite players who you want to worship and revere, and magically, when something can be done to give them credit, you just give them the credit whether you know it or not. And when something goes wrong, you just go, well, it can't be their fault. I'm going to blame everyone else in the team, including people behind the scenes, who in this scenario, we have no reason to believe ever were the one who did it. So just throw that out there for you. Now, part of the reason why I personally am worried about this move is I always suspected, go back and watch my shows, I'm the only person who always planted a narrative seed that maybe everything in Heroic wasn't peaches and cream. Maybe it wasn't awesome like it seemed on camera. Remember, on camera, Heroic is heavily tied to what cadiaN's story was. So because cadiaN's story was like journeyman, goes through the ups and downs, then comes good later, and finally people believe in him and buy into his system, and he doesn't just become a good player or a successful player, he becomes famous himself, well-loved. He's a captain, a very magnetic, charismatic figure. Everyone seems to love him and to follow him within their team, and they're all on the same page, and they're all doing the hugs and the speeches, and they're all brothers fighting. And what did I tell you as well? Which is, you'll see a lot of times someone on camera, sometimes for the cameras, does an amazing Any Given Sunday type speech, like, hey guys, take the guy next to you, and you got to look him in his eyes, and you got to know you're going to fight for those inches, and you're going to go. When you're doing all that speech, right, here's the problem with that. One, Sometimes that's for the camera. That's to make everyone aware you're legendary and you're doing an epic moment. It's going to be so cool. And to buy into it and get a fucking Dragon Ball Z spirit bomb going of all the fans hoping for it. But what people don't realise is sometimes players don't fuck with that. Sometimes they tune out of those. Sometimes they've had too many of those. Sometimes, by the way, the call doing all that, you're just thinking, I don't even fucking like this dickhead, or you're just annoying. Like, you said that last match, mate. So people just take it like a movie. Like, that's always working. It's awesome. And it means they all love him. It's all so tight-knit. But then a few months later, they have this crazy blow-up where they can't coexist at all, to the extent they have to kick cadiaN, but then they find out even the players don't want to say it, and they go to Astralis, and all that drama. You don't think there was ever any of that? You think that really just happened one day? I think that's something that builds up over time, and then when you get a couple of bad results at the end of CSGO, they were having some not as good results. You get a couple of bad results where you don't get what you wanted to happen, and then finally something happens and the straw breaks the camel's back. But the straw wasn't what breaks the camel's back. It's that it's already been weakened through all these other actions, and then finally all it takes is the straw to break the camel's back. That's the whole point of that analogy, that metaphor, isn't it? So I think in that scenario, first of all, I always wondered how much that really was doing for the team with all that. Because spoiler, the greatest teams of all time don't need an epic speech like that. It's just not a thing. That's something that looks like it's performative for the cameras. Or you do it when you know your team aren't good enough, and they really are a bunch of lucky losers and plucky underdogs, and they haven't been to the top. They don't even believe they can be. They don't have any confidence. Then maybe you do some rousing speech, some Churchill, we'll fight them on the beaches and fight them on the Scott Anubis at the major. You could do all that, couldn't you? So first of all, there's the IGL aspect, which is, even though it was a positive, another negative about cadiaN is I always did speculate that they just lived and died off hits calls. Like, I never thought that team had superstar players. I actually think that team getting as many HLTV top 20 players as they did, 3 at one point in time, is another sign that you have a Na'Vi type scenario where the in-game leader and potentially the coach are doing an awesome job, and they've gotten this team so that the system elevates players to look like top 20 players who probably aren't. Like, listen, Stown probably is. The funny thing is, even though people think he's a product of cadiaN's system, if you give him that system, though, he has phenomenal numbers in group stages, like really, really good numbers. So he might have been boosted a little bit on HLTV. Maybe he wasn't like, a 7th and 8th or a 9th player. He's probably more like a 13th because the system was helping him. But he was really good. Aside from him or any of the other players actually stars in that lineup, I don't think so. Like, I don't think Yabi really is. You know what I mean? Not in the way that other players from elite teams were top 20 players. Like, someone like a Dexter is way better than someone like a Yabi. Even if Yabi gets to be there, but Dexter's not in a good enough team to get enough placing, so he can't even be on the bloody list, can he? So I think that's kind of nonsense. I think there wasn't that many stars in Heroic. I think a lot of it was actually the calling style of cadiaN. But I also think that partly that's because of the personnel, and I don't think that can be replicated, and especially not in Astralis, even though they've got Yabi and Stown, because of device. That's the point I'm going to get to in a minute. So I do think, I pointed out in the past, I was the first one to come up with it, I do think cadiaN had main character syndrome. In fact, I still think he does. Even when he's given up rifle now. Look, I'll give him this. I think for a month or two, he will give it up. He will be very, very hands-off, and he'll work with device, and he'll try and make it work. But I think eventually, inevitably, his annoying personality is going to come through. Inevitably, I think they're eventually going to have conflicts and different ways of seeing the game. And I think some things are just not going to work, and there's going to be the odd bad result that's going to really upset them. Device is someone who has routinely punched monitors over his career when things go badly. He's not a guy who tolerates losing, I'll tell you that right now. He's not a guy who's going to, oh, well, guys, like they seemed like they did in Heroic when they lost. Well, arm around each year. It's okay, guys. We tried. We'll get him next time. I still want to hear that shit, mate. He's one of the greatest winners of all time. So I think part of that main character syndrome, I don't know if it'll initially manifest, but I think it's almost inevitable with cadiaN. I've always said, I think the reason why is a very understandable human one. If you did battle for 10 years and no one gave a fuck about you and told you were wrong, and told you can't AWP and IGL, you're not going to AWP or you're going to IGL, and you go through all these shitter teams and these bad North lineups, and you're rolling around, you're in Heroic, and you're in Heroic with Snappy, and then you're the IGL, you're doing all this shit. I think after all that, if you get together a bunch of players that were cast-offs from Copenhagen Flames and smaller teams, if you get them, and there were fucking players that were playing in, actually, if you don't know, people like Tessis were playing in the old Copenhagen Flames before that. If you're getting all these like nobody players and then you're taking them with you because of your calls and your system and your play even to the top of the world, I imagine it's totally plausible that you'll have a big ego and you'll think, I did a great job because you did do all that. The question is though, How can I then take those players out and insert like one of the greatest players of all time? I think he's going to respond the same way. So I think the main character syndrome did manifest as he was calling his own number. He made a lot of fucking calls around himself when they had the AWP, by the way. I've even seen him do like a weak AWP buy when some of his teammates that was HLTV top 20 didn't necessarily have a rifle even. He would absolutely get his own setup, like have flashes for himself, have boosts for himself so he could take picks against other star AWPers, especially on maps like Nuke or Mirage, etc. He would go in with his own, with the bomb sometimes. He would do that fake thing where the rest of the team does a proper attack onto, say, like the A site or Mirage, and he goes on his own into B with the bomb. And I'll tell you why. One, yes, because he's the IGL, he can time it well and all that. That's one way to say it. But two, I'll tell you the other reason he did it. Because he wanted to be the one that won the clutch. He wanted to go plant the bomb, then when the other team realised, they come to him, and then he gets to do some epic FPL 1v3 clutch in the B site on Mirage, for example. Like, a lot of it was actually about, we're going to win, but we're going to win on my terms, in my way, and with me as the hero. That's why I do think at that major, when he made that stupid play on Inferno, where he could have just won the round straight up against Game Legion, it didn't throw the whole series, but it stopped Heroic winning 2-0, which I think they would have had a better chance. I think part of that was cadiaN's ego. cadiaN didn't want to just beat Game Legion, some nobody team, and go to a major final. He wanted to be the reason, or the one who got the winning kill or the winning play that they then beat Game Legion, and he got to stand up on stage and go, "Are you not entertained?" He wanted to do that, and in doing so, he selfishly and naively made a silly play that fucked around. They lost that map, they lost that series, and there was no moment for anyone to do that. "Are you not entertained?" He blew it. He actually blew it. So I think that one's wild if you think about it. It could have been in another major final. They could have had another chance to win one. By the way, Vitality was right there for the taking. Look how they were playing against those fucking teams outside of the top 18. They were having a hard time against all of them. But he blew it. He didn't even get to that final. I also will just say this. Even if you think to yourself, yeah, but a lot of those heroic players are shy though, aren't they? That doesn't mean they like him mega attention whoring. In fact, they don't vibe with that as an approach. So it's not just his case of like, well, he balances them out. I think he did it too much. And I think actually they didn't appreciate that. I mean, similarly, I don't think those other players liked him trash talking, by the way. Maybe someone like Tessus can handle it. Shushes seems like he's all right with banter. But you look, I think Yabby hated it, mate. I don't think he vibes with that at all. I think he's absolutely a guy who feels fragile. I think Stown has known the whole time on some like deep down level that he probably denies, that he has these choking issues and that he has performance issues and that he needs a lot of help and a cultured environment from cadiaN and the others in his squad. So I think when cadiaN was trash talking, and especially like trash talking with Astralis and doing things that are going to make the Royal Arena your home crowd and go against you, and then all the Brazilian fans are going to boo you because when you do all that, I've always said I think that made it worse for his teammates, and I think that actually exacerbated the choking and the losing it in big stage matches and knowing that you're going to crumble when the fans hate on you and everyone boos you and everyone cheers the opponent beating you. I think that worked for cadiaN, and that's who cadiaN wanted to be. I don't think that's who a lot of the other rogue players wanted to be, and so I think that set the sour environment within his team. I don't think they enjoyed being booed in the same way he did. He did it because he just enjoyed the attention, positive or negative, right? I think the others didn't want that. I think they'd have rather been an up-and-coming team where they've gotten the respect for like being plucky and people would just respect them on the way up and people would know they haven't accomplished it yet. They wouldn't make crazy expectations, kind of like what they were doing to Mouse early on. We were all lovely to Mouse for like 2 years while they floundered in similar scenarios. It's only now, and by the way, now they've talked a bunch of shit. Now they've denied choking. Now we're all giving them the scrutiny. Heroic was getting that as though they were the prime Astralis lineup, for fuck's sake. Then there's the whole Kasper Straub Hansen angle, who's the sports director at Astralis. This guy, indirectly, supposedly, is one of the reasons why the whole breakup happened. Like, supposedly, he was the one that was really friendly with Stown, right? Which people don't know, as a totally legitimate reason. Supposedly, after Stown's brother died, I can imagine he needed a support network. He needed somebody he could talk to. Maybe, I remember he took that Blast World Finals off in 2022. Maybe he even thought about, I'm not going to keep playing or any time off. If you could have someone within the org that's sort of simpatico with you, they're on the same level as you, they vibe with you, they understand you, they get your position, they can get your back, they can give you space to talk about things separately. I think that's a brilliant personality. The problem then becomes, it could become a conflict of interest like this, where then you and that person start to just determine the fate of the team or whether you're leaving or what's happening elsewhere or the lineup or who's getting kicked. That's an obvious concern. You want that decision to only be made on in-game stuff or personnel stuff, not like personal, like I have a conflict with him when you're the two key players of the team. So obviously then the Kasper Straub guy went to Astralis. He even had that thing where he actually got to like start early or something, even though his contract said he'd start at a certain date. Then magically, as soon as he's in Astralis, you have all these issues within Heroic. Suddenly you have all these massive issues where Stown and cadiaN just can't coexist. By the way, it's even inferred, I think, like I just suggested, that means when Casper guy was there, it allowed Stown and cadiaN to coexist because maybe like the Stown guy could use Casper as a sounding board or to help him deal with cadiaN even, or to offset some of his issues or vent. But when he didn't have him there, either one, there was nowhere for Stown to do that and he bottled it up and then eventually exploded. Or even worse, two, you still went to him privately, potentially, I'll speculate. And in doing so, it was sort of like either he said it or you said it, or it seemed like your idea of like, maybe we should just work together away from cadiaN in Astralis. Wouldn't that be cool? You know, poaching, in other words. Let's just speculate. Then obviously initially that resulted in cadiaN was getting kicked from Heroic, so suddenly that was the big news, and everyone was looking for moves and who joins Heroic. But then in the end, cadiaN does leave Heroic, but then Stown and Yappy leave to Astralis anyway, although fair play. Apparently Heroic did charge Astralis the dickhead tax and just made it way more expensive. Don't worry, by the way, I've heard Heroic had to pay their own dickhead tax to get nerds from Ents, but that's a separate story, isn't it? And obviously that ended up with a scenario where Heroic got cadiaN, Stown and Yappy. They just got all the top players from the team. We'll get back to that in a minute though, won't we? Now, cadiaN and Team Liquid, I'll very briefly touch on, because my problem is he had some very good players. Better than he had in Heroic. And you could argue, obviously you're mainly going off name value with like Yekindar, you could argue better than Astralis is now on paper. Like Stair is better than Yekindar, but you wouldn't have said that a year ago when you were making these moves, right? So you go look at that team. Naf, Twists, Yekindar, that already should be enough to cook. Those are like HLTV top 20 players from past years. You would think cadiaN could do a lot. That's why it was called a super team. It's why I thought they'd be really fucking awesome, actually. And people, I've heard in that team, people initially did believe in him and they did want to play with him. So you had all this goodwill and some really good players, and it's your chance to show you're not just about Danish players or just the ones that fit your system. And he failed. Because his system, it turns out, you know that joke of Zonic, like, I am the bag. It turns out cadiaN's system is cadiaN. Like, I've heard he was very stubborn. He wouldn't work with other people's ideas or playbooks. He'd just argue with you the whole time that he's right, even if it didn't work and wasn't right and the others didn't want to do it and he couldn't understand what they were doing. He kept going for hero calls all the time and crazy shit. And here's my problem. That is basically antithetical to the Astralis way of doing things. Like, you think about people like Glaive, Zonic, Device himself, the system Astralis played in, the protocols they religiously ran through, the fact that even they could be a much more slow-paced team, and their rotations were genius on CT, but they were clearly based on, like, players communicating, working like 2 people together or 3 people together, or someone making, like, a mid-round call. They weren't just like everyone does exactly what cadiaN says and turns their brain off. Just do whatever he says with no questions, which apparently is what happened in Heroic, and it sounds like what he wanted to happen in Liquid. It's just the problem there, mate, is this. You ain't going to get Yekindar and Twist to do that. For good or for ill, by the way. They're going to have their opinion, their take, and they're themselves, if they don't think it works, going to come up with their own playbook and their own strat. Suggest that. And if you don't listen to them, you're going to have conflicts. I'll tell you what, they're spicy guys too. They're absolutely willing to argue and go back and forth, even in a public setting. Also, by the way, you think Rogger just wants to play just, yeah, Casper. I mean, remember cadiaN's name is Casper. You just call everything cadiaN. You just call everything pro. Like, I think he wants to have input. I think he wants to have a system. I think he's waited years to get back into a position where it's not just people like Nexa that was IGL or the fucking whatever he had in the last lineups of OG. I'll also tie this to what happened with the Astralis super team when they made it, because I think that actually makes you ask questions about some of the players in the team as well, right? I didn't actually think it would work when they made that move. When they said Stown and Yappy are joining Astralis, and it's going to be the lineup they had before. If you remember, they had Borup as like the 5th, and then they had Blame F, Device, and Stair. Those were the players, right? I didn't think it would work because of the roles. I mean, for a start off, they had no clear top in-game leader. I've never been a big fan of Blame F as an in-game leader. I think he's a brilliant individual player, though. Then you had the Stown and Blame F overlap. That just looked obviously a concern immediately right out the gate. Then you had the whole thing that if you're kicking Borup, you're going to make Stair play like Borup when you make this. You know what I mean? Like, what are we doing with this? Or Bars or whoever it was they had before. Like, you already knew you're probably just now going to sacrifice the Stair guy you've brought in. And then what crucial thing that no one ever mentioned back then is if I'm making a super team, I want a coach that fits the personnel. The coach was that nobody guy called Ronick. Whoever the fuck Ronick is, that was just the coach of the team. But as I said at the time, I wanted to see them try. I wanted to see if it could work. If you remember, didn't they like wreck Vitality right out the gate or something like that? The talent was there. Like, you look at those 4 players, Device, Blame F, Stown and Yappy are all HLTV top 20 players. Like, that looks like a super team. And then you have the novelty of a super team. Wow, what would it be like if you made that? The potential, imagine if they could all play at their level. Wouldn't even matter if Blame F was that good in IGL. Then you take out Blame F and you make Device IGL. I hate that move already because I'm taking away from Device's focus on being the best AWPer. And I'm almost guaranteed he can be one of the best AWPers, but I don't know if he can be the best AWPer and IGL. And then, yeah, you have the whole nonsense where he comes out and says, I've been thinking about doing this for years. And yeah, I could see myself doing this for years to come. I'm really committed to it. I don't buy that was ever the case. I think that might have been a thought, but I think they also did that because they wanted to blame F out and because they wanted to try something different. And at the time, they couldn't sign big players, so you could only get bro. So it was like, oh, I'll do it then for the time being. But actually, what worries me is he didn't do the nitro and fully commit. I told people that the problem with devices, when it's all peachy at the beginning and when you get initial results and when it's all novel, you'll be fine with it. But the problem always comes when you have some hard results that you don't like. You keep losing the close games, you keep losing on a certain map, you keep losing on a certain opponent, you lose a couple of rounds earlier in the playoffs in the bracket than you think you should. You no longer ever have the potential to make a final. You're not winning anything. That's when you start thinking about IGL. Fuck this role. Especially if you can be a star AWPer at the same time. Why am I doing this role? Why don't I just stick to my opening, bring in a proven IGL? And then someone like Stam goes, I know a guy, you up? You do that move, don't you? Then also, yeah, they had the initial spring in their step when they got those early results, but nothing really concretized out of that. It just looked promising early on. Remember, they got 0 finals, 0 titles. They never really actually threatened to win the championship. They had what the Chengdu, and then they had a few tournaments they made playoffs and then nothing. Guys, that's not that far off what cadiaN did in Liquid and failed Super Team. They also could be a playoff team and then do nothing beyond that and never really challenge for a title. So, except similarly themselves, fully enough, around like events like a Chengdu. So, I just don't think it really worked that well anyway. I think actually people overhyped that because of how it went in, the first 2 or 3 weeks when people were getting used to the team. The major issues, I think, that are going to plague Astralis with cadiaN joining as in-game leader, but rifler, we'll just start with each aspect. So in-game leader, I'm already really, really worried about this. In the past, when it was CS2, the reason why I was willing to do the move of like, it's okay, maybe cadiaN can be IGL, and then you let, like, it's actually Device I used to say back in the day, maybe you can let Device join because he's just the best Danish AWPer, isn't he? The reason for that is, one, it was an all-Danish team, so I felt like the team play could stay amazing. Two, cadiaN would have way less impact. He wouldn't frag as well, but you'd have Device fragging way better than cadiaN ever did on the AWP. And back then, I'd never seen cadiaN IGL outside the context of these Danish teams. And obviously, you're thinking of the last few years of Heroic, where he's really good. So you're thinking, hopefully, he can still be at least 90%, 85% of the same IGL, in which case, in terms of the net quality of the team, it just gets better. Now, if you look at it, though, the real problem is you have to be a little bit more cynical. Like, you look, cadiaN was very good in Heroic in the post-online era, but only there. He wasn't good in Team Liquid. I mean, let's go further than that. He wasn't anything special in North way back. You go years before that when he's in other teams, Rogue and all that. He wasn't some like super special player or IGL. I actually think in Heroic, he got really good and had a couple of years, but it was that specific lineup, and then you can also say the one with Refresh, but that core generally, and let's be real, until they added in Yabi, they were just a team that always let you down in like those semis, etc. Once they added Yabi, they had a chance to win, but even then they couldn't quite get over the hump, and they had those really close wins, the odd blast, which wasn't as important. It is something of a banana cup. So you think of past lineups and past teams not called Heroic, and it's already getting a bit concerning. So you think about it, right? What are the factors so far that has allowed cadiaN to succeed? Right? The specific core that includes Shush and Tesses, who I think are fabulous role players, who are showing you now in Heroic. It wasn't just about cadiaN. They do their job regardless. Then you had Stown, who seemingly needs him and isn't the star like a Nico or a Simple, who's like, give me my agency, or Shocks back in the day. I want to do what I want to do, and my version of CS is you let me play loose, and then I make a secondary caller in mid-round. No, Stown seems the opposite. He seems like the guy who's like, no, plug me into your system. I will frag if you make me comfortable, protect me, set me up, allow me to go in last, etc. Give me all the comms, and then maybe you even call for me. I even suspect maybe cadiaN sometimes microdes down at the end of the round. Like, when I look at it, right, when your star player needs you like that, they are going to buy into your system in a way that, where I just said, other star players who might be like, I don't really want that system, thanks, Drake meme. That's actually what they're going to think, isn't it? Then add in, it was not only all Danish, this is all Danish too, but crucially, it was all inexperienced players, every single one. So let's go through the list. Like, you look, Tesses and Shush were like Mad Lions players, boys, like tier 2/tier 1.5. They were never in top teams. They worked with Hunden, mega old boomer who's shit at the game. They had a really good IGL. They worked with a Cillian who's like marginally better at the game and not as good an IGL, but an all right IGL, a decent systems IGL. That means in all these teams, and by the way, those guys were just doing their job in those teams. That means they're very open to listening to the IGL, and especially a Danish structured team where an older mentor IGL just tells you what to do. So when cadiaN came along, they were perfectly suited for this guy. This was almost the dream IGL for them. And because they're inexperienced, and to them, cadiaN's bigger and better and more experienced than them, not totally true in terms of better, but in terms of his career, they're just thinking, right, he knows the way. We'll do what he says. I think he didn't find that in Liquid at all. He walked into a room full of HLTV top 20 players, people who'd won Grand Slams, and people who'd like been in Tier 1 finals and thought they were hot shit years before he ever got there. And then they were sort of like, right, show me what you got. And then when they didn't like what he had to show them, they were like, I'm not buying into this, or we'll do it. And then when we lose, you know what, we'll grumble behind your back and we'll turn again. I don't think that happened in Heroic, except maybe at the end. And I would speculate some of that was personal things, or cadiaN being too egotistical, etc. Then let's consider when he was good IGL in the past, it was only while AWPing. I mean, I used to be a critic of it because I used to think you're taking away one of those powerful weapons from what could be a star player. You're not good enough to do that. I actually think cadiaN and Jim are the absolute bottom level of what's acceptable as an AWPer because they were so good as IGLs. I think the IGL part offset it in the same way as it doesn't matter that cadiaN isn't a great entry player or space creator because he's not a bad role space creator. He just can't frag. But he's so good as an IGL, and with his late round calls and mid round calls, it makes up for the fact that he's going to die and he might be 4v5 sometimes. That's why the stat to always watch with these is what their 4v5 stats are. They can't ever win like that, then they're fucked as a team, aren't they? Because cadiaN's typically not getting big fragging. So the only AWPing part now becomes a concern because I just saw him AWP when he's a way worse AWPer in CS2. He never looked anywhere close to as good as an AWPer in Team Liquid as he did in CSGO in Heroic. Like even in the clutches, he could still win the odd clutch with the AWP, but he wasn't as dynamic. He definitely couldn't do the same picks that he used to where he called his own number. He'd get a boost, he'd get a pick, he'd take an angle, he'd slow the game down. He'd sort of set up, read the defense, then go for a 1v1. He couldn't get those kills. He was really struggling. He was having to play a bit baity himself. He clearly wanted to put himself in the clutches. Then he wasn't necessarily winning them. He'd just win the odd one. And just people remember those like a lot of his career. And so I think if you look at it, he called such an idiosyncratic style that I actually now wonder, can he IGL without being the AWPer? Now, that might sound counterintuitive because typically I wouldn't want the AWPer to be my IGL, right? Because it's a role where people often just focus on the crosshair. People are obsessed with their duel. People don't want to go first and get banged by the rifler or get pushed out by utility. But if you look at the way he called around how he AWPed, a la Fallen in Luminosity back in the day, Jam in Virtus Pro, the difference is, Fallen would go up and he would use the AWP to scout and take early contact. Then he could make a call based on what he just saw, the information he got, and make a really quick read. And then maybe there could be a rotation on the other side of the map, or he can call people to himself because he's seen enough people in the mid on train, for example, that are going to now attack the outer site. He can make a very quick call using that info. And because his style of AWPing was combat AWPing, he can maybe even get a kill and maybe even get out and do a crazy sequence where he makes people chase him. And then when you chase him, Cold Zero's on and off angle fragging you. FNX is coming out and killing to you while you're trying to kill Fallen. Right? That was one way of AWPing and IGLing around how you play. You look at Jame, he clearly AWPs around his own comfort and where he wants to maneuver with the AWP in the round. This is mainly CSGO Virtus Pro I'm talking about. That's why it's really slow, so that at the end, if he wants to commit to a site, well, that's going to cost him his AWP if he dies and doesn't win the clutch. Jame doesn't ever want to commit to the site in the clutch unless he feels like there's a high chance of winning. Otherwise, he goes for the save, he goes for the exit kill, and he would play very, very slow, and that's why they would run the rounds down. And always he wants the option, if the round is failing, to pull the emergency fucking lever and a trap door opens up and he jumps out and it goes, sorry, Flit, they expect one of us in the rubble, brother. The fire rises. And then he just fucks off with his AWP and then you're all just dead and you have to be sacrificed and lose the round. And sometimes you've seen it before. I've not only seen him buy a glass cannon AWP, I've seen him just save an AWP, then give nothing to his teammates and they're all on Tech 9s or whatever. And he plays another baity round. So that's a really slow version. For me, cadiaN was somewhere between the two. He would play a bit more of an up-tempo version, but he would still take his time on T-Segs. He wants to set up a shot, but he's not going for the pure, just peek into them, almost like face-checking MOBA that Fallen would do. And then when he gets his shot, then he's going to call a very fast round in reaction. Quick take the site because I've got the first kill, or I died here, so do a distraction elsewhere. For me, his AWP was essential to how he both saw the game and called the game. Because when you have the AWP and you're an AWPer and you're a good IGL, so you can think of a few examples in history, if you want one from CS 1.6, how about Vilden, the old guy from Eyeballers and SK in 2005, won like 3 CPLs. This is a guy who had a very stable AWPing style, was a very brilliant tactician, would do stuff from spawn and demos, but it meant that he wasn't a crazy AWPer because he was trying to do an actual controlled style, and the AWP was used to fit his style of calling, so to hit certain shots, to lock off certain angles. When you have the AWP, one thing you can do is you can divide part of the map. You can have a line of sight where it's like they can't cross this line unless they come and meet me and see my AWP. So now I can already make certain calls and infer things by process of elimination of where you or they can go or where they can be. I can already guess that in a way I wouldn't know if I was the guy behind the AWPer backing him up waiting with a flashbang. If I was just the entry player looking around a corner, but I'm just looking and jiggling the corner, I'm not getting to look at a long line of sight or lock an angle off. Then also, when you get that information, it's very different for you, the IGL, to get the info and then add it into an equation in your brain and make a call or a read. If you get that info from someone else, the communication factor comes in, where basically they might miscommunicate it or not give you the right info or not give you it in the right moment or say it in a way that's slightly misleading so you don't fully understand. It's why, as a general rule, a lot of IGLs go in the entry pack. Because what they want to do is, when they trigger the timing of when you attack with the lurker and with the people doing the util, they know if they're one of the people going in, that's one less person to worry about coordinating. That's one less person to micro. That's one less person to worry about fucking up understanding the call. Basically, as an IGL, a little secret is, you often just take the dirty work or the trickier things or the things that are timing related, and you take that problem out of the hands of a teammate and you just call it. So my issue is this. I actually really worry about a lot of those aspects. I think a lot of the brilliance of Heroic, like instant reactions and then like really smart mid-rounds that they immediately executed on, I think a lot of that was based around him AWPing, how he AWPed, and also when he wanted to do those distractions when he went with the bomb by himself, wasn't he? So you take all that out of the equation. Is it Device that goes with his own with the bomb now? Is it Device that gets up to do this? Does this mean Device secondary calls and still calls in that moment, and you can call a player for Device, then he calls something that he saw with the info? That could work, but I have no idea how these guys are going to synergize. There's a world where that could be excellent. He could be a great caller and secondary caller duo, and maybe that's where Device finds out that's what he was doing in the original Astralis with his AWPing style anyway, and all the demos and heat maps, and that's just a better style for him, a la Cold Zera, Sharks, Nico, all these people, Alu, that all learned they are a secondary caller. They're a good secondary caller, but they're not supposed to be the primary main shot caller, and they wouldn't want to be. That's the crucial thing. They also learn off their experience, I don't want to be. It's not something I want to do. The problem I also have is, I did feel like part of cadiaN's game was every T-half, I'm going to call 1 or 2 set pieces for myself. Like I say, a boost, an isolation, someone gives me util, someone space creates. Because if I get this key kill, it's something I've looked at the demo or read the game so far, and I think this breaks the game open. Right? Again, it's a lot harder to call those players. In fact, you probably shouldn't if you have Device. Why are you calling the player for him? In this scenario, it's more like, let's let him take a pick. Let's let him create something. And he's going to see the game differently because he's a star AWPer. You're an IGL AWPer. Those are 2 different roles and aspects. Then I'll just say this. I said it before. If you think it was bad in Liquid, that was at least when he had his AWP. Remember, even though the AWP's not a weapon in theory, you want to go into a 1vx. That's why people trade for rifles. If you're the person in the 1vx, and it's a 1vx where you've like planted the bomb, for example, and think of Nuke Lore, you get to like hide around the doors. Actually, an AWP can be an excellent weapon for that because you can just play a million off angles. You can just force them to come and chase you, and then you're just sort of fade away AWPing them, going around corners one by one. It's a great way to create 1vx's, right? If cadiaN isn't AWPing, and he isn't even as good in CS2 anyway, and his rifle was a bit sus in CSGO, I think it's going to be mega sus in CS2 on its own, and he's also going in the entry pack, then he's not going to be in those clutches. He's not going to win those hero clutches. Now look, Device in that scenario will win those hero clutches, but you're not going to get them from cadiaN. So I think from cadiaN individually, you are going to see not very much in terms of individual game outside of IGLing. So first of all, that means he's IGLing. I don't even need it to just be as good as in Heroic. It needs to be even better. Unless Device is actually going to be a top 5 player in the world, I need cadiaN's IGLing to be phenomenal so that it doesn't matter some of these other aspects that I'm definitely going to lose about his individual game I used to have when he was the AWP IGL of Heroic. And then lastly, I've said this before, he was never an elite AWPer on his own. He was just good enough to let the team be a true contender, not just a dark horse even. They could have won loads of those tournaments, but I'll always say this. Look, it's kind of cheating because if he didn't AWP, like I say, would he have IGL'd the same? But I always felt like if they'd have just had an AWPer that was even 5% better, they'd have a bunch more trophies. They might even have that major. They might have won IEM Rio even. I always thought they were that close, and I don't want to just hate on him. Sometimes there's a role player elements like Tesses would fail in big matches sometimes. Shush just has quiet games. He's sort of the Messi of their team, even though I think he's very good and he fills the team a lot. When they had refresh, he would just have bad fragging performances, even though he was a clutch player. I thought it wasn't just cadiaN's fault, but since he did make the whole team about himself and call everything for himself, I have to put some of the blame on his feet, where he wasn't a good enough AWPer to do it. Like, put it this way, I actually think in this recent Astralis that Device was a better AWPer IGL, crucially AWPer IGL, as in the AWPing part, than cadiaN was an AWP IGL. But cadiaN was a better IGL AWPer than Device is a better IGL AWPer, if you see. Essentially, Device was the AWP part better, cadiaN was the IGL part better. Now, you could argue they're trying now to do an Archon and mix to do, but as I say, I don't think it's as simple to extricate cadiaN from AWPing if you want him to win game lead. Then also, on the rifling thing, he was never that good. Like, this is where people go really too far. When we say that, like, Kenny S or Guardian's rifle wasn't really good, we mean compared to their AWP or the best riflers in the world. Kenny S, by the way, in his prime will murk teams with a rifle. He's not going to be Kenny S the AWPer, but he'll still be like a top 10 player in the world with a rifle. Meanwhile, you go and you look, cadiaN on a rifle, like, not only is he worse than an AWP, he's irrelevant. He's nobody. Like, I actually don't even know in terms of fragging. Will he even be that much better than the low fragging IGLs? I don't know how much impact I'm going to see him have. I don't think he's that skilled a rifler personally. And I also do worry, as I was alluding to, if you take the AWP away from him, this is the other side of it. I worry that it will actually affect his identity. I think his identity is that he is it's that I'm a journeyman who came good. So now it's about me and look at me winning in my way, doing all the things they told me I couldn't do, like AWPing, like IGLing, like playing with nobody players. I think his identity is very wrapped around the idea that you win and you're the major reason why, including the plays you make. So I think your mentality is going to get cracked a little bit. You're going to have to completely reshape who you are. You're going to have to lose a lot of the ego, by the way. Now, the ego is a lot of what people like about cadiaN, a lot of what people might even argue helped him drive heroic, but he's going to have to take a backseat in that sense and understand he's not going to be one of the central pieces. In fact, it's only his calls that are going to be important. His play probably going to be a liability. And then also, I'll just put this out there, I think this will affect the length of time he gets. Like, I have a prediction, you'll see when Hot Take Point Made comes out in a few days. I have a prediction that I think the result of this move will be that within a year, either cadiaN or Device won't be in Astralis. I think either Device will just get pissed off with it. He's old, 29, he's got his health issues, and I don't think he'll get along with cadiaN. I think they'll argue and he'll have bad results. Or the other way around, Device might stay, they might do another rebuild of Astralis, and it's just cadiaN gets to move on because he was just an okay or a good IGL, but he wasn't a good enough fragger. He was too much of a liability on the rifle, and he was annoying and argued and lost his personality and his confidence and the calls and the big speeches and stuff. I think that could also happen. That's a real consideration. And then on the attitude thing, look, I will do that TL video another time where I go into depth, but I'll just say this. I think cadiaN is going to really annoy Device. Device reminds me of the kind of seriousness where they can banter and joke, but they banter and joke a bit like the Fnatic team of CS2. You know, the one with Olafmeister and Crims and Flusher. Their jokes were almost like out of elitism. It was like the joke is like, look, of course we're better than you. We can banter you a bit because we're the best team in the world and we're actually the best of all time and we can beat everyone. And so the joke is always like, haha, we're better than you. It was never really like silly shit like, lol, Mongols are noobs, la, 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 or like, oh, hey, Brazilian crowd, hate me, ha ha ha, you not entertain. It was never that kind of attention whoring for me. And then also, I think that another set of Swedes, a bit like NIP with people like Forrest and Get Right, I think they get annoyed when people are just irritating people. They never shut the fuck up. They always have to be saying something or saying a silly joke or trying a silly meme, or they are someone who was just kind of like that annoying kid in the group, but now because they got famous like cadiaN, suddenly they're like one of the centers of attention, like, oh, and everyone's just thinking, oh, what do you have to say? I think that tilts the piss out of them. If you don't know, I've always said Makalele in NIP looked like a better fit than actually, I think Alu was a better AWPer, but I actually thought Makalele dynamically for what he brought to the team was a better fit than Alu and for Thooorin. But NIP preferred Thorin as a teammate because he didn't annoy them and they loved him. And then Alu, just because he had comparable skills, probably better as an AWP than Makaleli, but he didn't bring any of that annoying personality. He was this cold, stoic Finnish guy who, until you put all the vodka in him or he's on a voice comm, doesn't say anything weird. Aside from that, he just does the odd joke, which really is just like an icebreaker, or he just plays CS and frags. Whereas Makaleli had great impact on the team, looked like he added a lot to their squad and rounded them out in an interesting way, had loads of like impact players, but he was really annoying and he never shut the fuck up, I heard. And it was always either whining or making some shitty joke or some silly nonsense or so. And that pissed people like get right off, I can tell you. They didn't want that. Like, they're the greatest players of all time. I think that is going to happen with cadiaN and Device. I think this whole attention whoring thing is going to get real old unless you're winning. I think the trash talking is going to be good until you have these big losses where people choke and it just makes people go even harder on Stown or even harder on cadiaN or even harder on Stair in this case, who's going to be in a shitty role potentially. I think when he whines, it's going to get to someone like Device. I think when he argues, it's going to really piss him off because someone like Device is not only a smart guy, he's gone head-to-head, tete-a-tete with the best minds in Denmark. Glaive, Zonic, Magus, etc. He used to work with fucking cadiaN, didn't he? And Zipniks, these are all brilliant thinkers. Now I've got cadiaN. I was giving them the time of day and going back and forth, and we're having our space where we can argue, and I can disagree here, but I respect you still. And then cadiaN's going to be there. I've heard from Team Liquid. He was just arguing like a little kid. Just never give up the point, always double down, never apologise, never admit you're wrong, never say that like the other person was right. Even if they come with more information or they try to re-spark the topic again, you've always got some silly... I think Device is going to fucking hate that. I think in the early days, they'll try really hard. My prediction, they'll do loads of media early on. They'll look at their friends and they're cool and they'll do funny like back and forth banter skit videos with the SL. But I think behind the surface, I think it'll start to grate on Device. I think I have a decent enough read on him that I don't think this is the sort of player he likes. There's a reason there was a group chat called like fuck cadiaN and everyone in the Danish scene was in it. That's Device's era when he was coming up, by the way. These guys came up together in Counter-Strike. So I don't buy that one at all. And then also with the arguing aspect, I've heard he argues a lot behind closed doors. Even why now I suspect, you know what, I'll just tell you. After I heard the shit about Team Liquid, I just straight up DM'd Stown. I just told him, mate, I actually sort of think some people probably owe you an apology in the scene. Like, I sort of get it now. I actually didn't get it before because I bought the cadiaN hype about certain things about how he was and the captain and stuff. Now I sort of get it. If this was true, I can see why you didn't want to play with him. Now, look, that's aged poorly on the side of Stown. I won't say what he said, but at the time you'd imagine maybe he was happy that was the case. Now he's bloody playing with him again. So, but that just shows how desperate. Like, essentially the meme here, if you're Stown, surely, is that Loki meme from the fucking first Avengers movie, where it's like, he's just fucking... cadiaN sat there inside that cell like Loki, and he's just going, you must be pretty desperate to come to me, Stown. And then Stown's like, yeah, I am. So I'll just say it this way. If you're going to do the whole, it's my way or the highway, that might work if the person you're talking to is checks notes Tesses, checks notes Refresh, checks notes Stown. That won't work if it's Device. Because spoiler, his way is the way you win all the majors. Your way hasn't won a fucking dick major yet. You've only won some Blast Banana Cups. Your way doesn't actually work. Hasn't been proven yet. You have to actually prove it works and convince Device. And also, this is Device, bro. They're not only one of the smartest players ever, with the craziest longevity ever. He still, by the way, can just turn up, start practicing and be amazing to this day. And he's already IGL'd half decent. You could argue better than you did in Team Liquid. You argued you had better players. And also, he's worked with Magisk and Zonic and cadiaN and... Bro, you've got a lot to live up to. Like, this guy ain't going to be tricked by some fucking, oh, look at the shiny thing here, children. Penny behind your ear. Like, he knows all those tricks, mate. You're going to actually have to be legit. And so if you then try it, it's my way or the highway. Spoiler, you'll be on the highway doing this. Like, can I hitch a ride to Gaming Gladiators / TSM guys? Anyone taking a hitchhiker? Because it'll be fucking Device Day, not you. Or he'll just get sick of it and retire. Like, if Stair can't work in his role and fucking Stown plays badly and they don't have results and cadiaN's annoying, maybe eventually for your Device, you go, you know what, I'm 29, I've got the fucking illness with my stomach, I've had all this success, I'm not going to get more success now, there's no real Danish lineup to go and rebuild. Maybe I just say, fuck it, Astralis, it's cadiaN's team. You, Yabby and Stown can just stay here, and I just retire, ride off into the sunset, or become sort of a coach or some sort of management figure or something. That's plausible too, if you just really just say, fuck the whole project, and there's no way to rebuild, because to be fair, right now, I don't know what Danish pivot you do at this point. You probably need a year for some of those next guys to come up. And then I also think they have a totally different mentality to CS. The way cadiaN sees the game, I was told, was like it's him making a call largely on the fly in the moment based on what's happened or his read of the game or what he saw in a demo. It's not something that was written down in a playbook and handed out like Blade hands out to Na'Vi. It's not something where like Alexi B's like, right, we're going to call this strat and I'm going to improvise a little bit, but I'm only going to do... No, I've heard it's so much about cadiaN. It's like, I'm the chess master. I'm fucking Gendo or whatever his name is from fucking Evangelion. Like, I'm cadiaN. I'm figuring out the mid-round. Well, the problem with that is that's also, unless you're Carrigan, and even Carrigan, I think sometimes has to let the coach take some things and let a secondary call from Rops come in, etc. Even Carrigan can't do that all the time. And spoiler, even Carrigan had Device and that court lose faith in that calling style, and then later had like Nico, Olafmeister, Rain, Guardian lose faith in that calling style. So the stakes when you're trying that calling style are enormous. You have to always be right pretty much, otherwise they lose faith in you. And because they don't see you're working out, as it were, they don't see the playbook, they don't see what you were building on, they don't see what conditioning you were trying to establish, they're not going to know what you're doing. And they're just going to think it's a bad call or you just failed them ultimately. And they're going to think, I wish there was a playbook here I could refer to. I wish there was a fallback, plan B, plan C. I wish there was actually some like negotiation here. So I also want to see what style. Is he going to go and play Astralis style CS? Because if he does, by the way, I also don't think cadiaN's very suited for Astralis style CS. He'll have to reinvent himself. If he's going to play cadiaN style CS, then the question becomes, can Device play cadiaN style CS? Like, Device is skilled enough, but does he want to, is the point. Does he think that's what he brought cadiaN in to do? And then I'll just say, in terms of comms, that's a massive issue for me. Because Device is an incredibly influential player. He's even someone where I'll bet he actually got in the first few months buy-in from the players just because of who he is, what he's done, his mentality to the game. If you're someone like Device, how are you going to be integrated into the system? Before, you could do a cadiaN. You were the AWP, the IGL, and it's your team. Your Device, it's Astralis, bro. You could decide everything. Is cadiaN going to come in, humble himself, and build everything around Device and then slot himself in? History says no. So if that's not what's going to happen, how's Device just going to be integrated into a team? And the comm system, by the way. And what he's going to show up sometimes and let cadiaN, I don't know about this one. I have my questions. And then lastly, I'll just say this. The best point, it's why Maui's point on Steak and Banter, the good point, was that he actually thought it was good that cadiaN joined this team because he thinks the style of CT rotations, where they just make a snap call and all rotate immediately without even questioning or just looking on their screen, just go to where they're told, allowed them to be really, really fast reacting on CT and CS2. And he thinks that would be excellent for CS2, the way that the meta is played with this like super aggressive T-sides. I agree, but the problem is, think about why that style of rotation worked in CS2. It's because when cadiaN, as the cliche goes, said jump, the others just said how high. Or yes, sir. They didn't go, yeah, but I think I see one here. I'm going to like hold him off and like, well, I'm going to wait behind this smoke. Like, I don't know, like, is my cross clear? Is my cross clear? Is my cross clear? Or like waiting and like, I don't know, I'm going to hold back. And no, they just did what he said. Right, well, first of all, they've now played a bunch of Device Astralis CS for months and months and months and months. So do they even have that style in the locker still? Secondly, is someone like Device going to do that? Someone who himself is an AWPer who has a lot of agency because he's brilliant himself at reading the map and knowing where his opponent is he just going to abandon that and short circuit and say, I just do what cadiaN says? If not, then it's not going to be as effective. Because remember, here's the way to think about it. The AWPer in cadiaN's system in CSGO and Heroic, when he said rotate AWPer immediately with the rest of the team, he was the AWPer, so he just did it. That's one less person to agree. In this scenario, Device is the AWPer. So that AWPer might get left James style on the other side. It might rotate in slowly. It might be waiting to save in a way cadiaN wasn't, because cadiaN also loved to go for clutches because he's got main character syndrome. So I actually think even some of those rotations won't be as good or they won't be as impactful. So I can see where Maui's building it. It's a decent angle. I just don't think it will be as present. Now, the crazy thing about all of this, by the way, is you're going to think from all this, I'm like the ultimate hater. Bro, who has been bigger Device fan than me for his whole career? I even actually liked cadiaN as an IGL. On Hot Take Point made in 2023, I was saying he was the best IGL in the world. I even enjoyed watching Heroic. They were one of the more fun teams to watch because they played real, actual fucking CS, like team play CS, working with the pieces like Na'Vi does now, except they had less of a set strapbook style. But the way they worked off each other was beautiful. So the sad thing is, I want this to work. I want to believe cadiaN can be a top IGL like he did in 2023. I want to believe Device can be a top 5 AWP again. I want to believe Stown and Yabby can be HLTV top 20 players. I want to believe Stair can find his place and then remain so that one day when one of those players moves on, he gets a better role and gets to become one of the Dupree Magisks of Astralis, not just a Farley or a Lockie, a player who played there and then got moved on. And I want, by the way, an all-Danish team to not just be top 10, to be top 5, to actually be mixing it up with Spirit and Vitality and Navi and G2 and these fucking squads and get busy in there and imagine how cool that story would be. But the sad thing is, I said it before, I think this will end in tears. I think Device retires or cadiaN kicked within 1 year. It's a bold prediction. It's only speculation. I'm not basing it on any secret inside info. It's just what I think happens. And then I'll just throw in a last couple of things which go like this. Actually, I just scrolled and there's way more. Why did I just say I'll throw in a couple last things? We'll keep going. First of all, an issue I do have is this. Before I get into some shady shit, it's that this could have been Huxley. That's another reason why I'm out on this move. If this was the last move left, fuck it, roll the die. You may as well, before you break up, definitely don't go international. Let's try another Danish lineup. Now, this could, though, have just been Huxley coming in. Imagine Huxley joins instead of Stair or Bro, and now we're doing Huxley and Copenhagen Flame style tactical CS. And we've got an amazing AWP in Device. That would be awesome to work with. And we can give a bit of agency to, like Monacy. But then Stown isn't going to be like Nico and want loads of agency. He's going to be told what to do in Huxley's system. People like Yabby are going to take all that direction. Whoever you keep out of Stair and Bro, they're going to listen to you and buy in. They're experienced players. I think that would have been an excellent move. I think that not only could have brought Device back to being a star player, I think Huxley is a good IGL. He's a top 10 IGL in the world. And I also think he has the tactical style to make it work and the attitude, like reduction compared to cadiaN. I think he would give Device the freedom. He speaks and is respected in Danish, I would imagine, more so than an international team. I think the reason why people like Kassad were sort of dunking on Huxley is, spoiler, you think people like Nexo, Hunter, Pekka and fucking Nico don't ever talk to Kassad. They will probably tell him what was going on behind the scenes. They will tell him where they did and didn't respect him, what he was good at, what he couldn't do. You guys, it's so silly that you all ignore that and act like Kassad's just speculating like you guys just hate him from outside a window. He had direct access in a way we didn't. I also think, by the way, Huxley would work great with Rogger. I think they're both people with a similar sort of mentality to the game and mindset and how to work with teams. And I also think no matter what you say about Huxley in the championships he won, I think he's eager to redeem himself. He just doesn't want to do it on a shit team like Gamer Legion where he has no chance to win. He wants to have like a JKS, another Crack or Dexter, a top team where he can actually like show something and totally redeem himself as an IGL and even potentially in a dream world, upset G2 and beat G2 and show them that they're wrong, etc. I think that's a pretty good motivating factor. Astralis would have been that team. If you give this guy Stown and Device, he's cooking. Right, let's get fucking going and let's show Snacks, who's IGL and shit in a G2 in my opinion. Let's show him what IGL is about and how much better I am with, in theory, worse players, but good enough players to do something. So the idea this could have been Huxley, that's also a bummer for me. I'd way rather it was Huxley. I actually, look, I like cadiaN more than Huxley, but in this case, I think Huxley is a better fit. I don't get it myself. I don't get it. I mean, the joke is, if we'd known what we know now, the real move you probably should have done as heroic was actually, at the end, when he heard that it was going badly inside Team Liquid, is actually try and get cadiaN back and kick fucking Nikados and then change out like Kixer or something. But I guess back then no one really was out on Kixer, was it? Because obviously he could have bought the AWP and the IGL with cadiaN and he would be very popular with heroic fans, wouldn't he? Then there's another aspect, which is this. There was an interview cadiaN did with Astralis on their website. So you can imagine, on their Twitch channel. So you can imagine, obviously it was a lot of fluff, but I'll tell you some things that were said there. I thought some of them were relevant. He said that he'd been doing a lot of physical work and had a mental deload, because obviously he's trying to make the case of sort of like a politician when they come in, like, all those things in the past were a problem, but we've overcome them, we acknowledge the issues, and now we're going to be better and move forward. He's obviously trying to set the ground at that, like I'm clearing the deck or whatever was going on in TL, even though he won't tell you what it is. Apparently they were doing like a boot camp as well, and then he said that when they got Yabby in Heroic, he actually had pitched the idea that Device joined Heroic back then and that he would give up the AWP. And he said that Device is one of only 3 or 4 people he would give the AWP up for, which, by the way, is legit. I always thought something he should have considered in CS2. Sadly, I imagine Heroic just either didn't have the money or there wasn't the interest from Device at the time, or maybe the other players even vetoed it. Who the fuck knows? He then said a quote, which I thought was very telling, because these could be famous last words if they fail. He said, "I'm not here to be mediocre. I'm not going to travel 160 days a year to go out in quarterfinals of a tournament. So those could be very famous last words, because right now, wouldn't you expect quarterfinals of the tournament to be where this team would go out if they started attending events? Now that I think was from the news post, but that's one of those ones like a Zontics interview headline. Just save that one in the bank. It'll come back to be interesting later. Then there's the whole thing that I actually hate, which is going to be my little rant about the Danish scene and what this means about pro players, which is, as a result of all this bullshit by cadiaN, Jaun, Stabby, and Stown and Yabby, and Casper Straub, by the way, these 4 individuals have utterly fucked Heroic to an extent that's so insane. If it wasn't so drawn out and so convoluted, you would actually assume this was an insane, like, psyop sting operation by Nickel and Ihom and Astralis, and that they've just played 17-dimensional underwater interdimensional battleships and won yet again over everyone. We're all marks, and they are fucking geniuses and Robert Redford, and we're just fucking idiots in the movie The Sting. Because think about this. Heroic was an org a couple of years ago when they had this top team with cadiaN and Stown, where there was one point where they were going to have to potentially shut the org down because they were running out of money. Instead, they took in millions in investment, and that allowed them to like re-sign the players. And they were in a position where, at the end of CS2, they would have been the number 1 Danish team like they had been for years and years in CS2, and the only one contending for majors. And they would have been in CS2. They would have had the better team now. There wouldn't have been a Danish super team. That would still have been Device, Blame F, a bunch of fucking people like Boz, maybe Glaves even still. Who the fuck even knows? What the hell would Astralis have been? Astralis was in a terrible competitive position, a terrible place roster-wise, and all these top players and pieces you wanted were in Heroic, your rival, and in theory had no reason to leave. Now, how does that go to shit for Heroic and become everything gets given to Astralis? That's gross. Like, Astralis had the worst team the entire post-online era onwards. cadiaN's team were in position to actually potentially win almost every major in CSGO after the online era. But what did that get cadiaN and Heroic? Well, if you're Heroic, you lost everyone who mattered to Astralis except the role players. It doesn't matter what the issues were, what the fuckery was, what the betrayals were. In the end conclusion is, yeah, you made a few million, by the way, selling them, but you lost those players, and your main rival got those players. They reassembled those players into some fucked up Danish beef Voltron, and then now you just lose and then they have your players, but you have a few million, which, by the way, goes nowhere in esports. You're going to be pissing that away on salaries right now. You've signed all people like Kixon and Dexter, etc. Now, ironically, for Device, everyone in Denmark and the Danish scene has Stockholm Syndrome. They all just worship everything about Astralis and ignore the negatives. Somehow, the problem with this org is this: they're too aspirational. Not only have people had it ingrained in their brain from seeing Astralis win and then being the Danish team and you cheering for them when you're a Danish player or a Danish fan, like Astralis is where I want to play one day, but more importantly, you ignore all the negatives and you just look at things like they can pay me a lot of money, the finances make sense, I get to play with Device, this is a more legendary org, think about the history, look at the banners in the rafter there. That aspect wins over everything else they've done. They've been shady to almost everyone in their org. They were even rude with how they dealt with people like Dupree and Magus, where they benched them intentionally at the end when they were leaving the team anyway. They were kind of shitty, quite frankly, with how they treated people like Zonic, I thought, when he left, and went out of their way to make out, like, have people say, like, Device, that, like, other coaches are, like, hey, the best coaches were. They were shitty to everyone. They were shitty to Lockie and Farley and Yugi. They were fucking shitty to who else? Fucking Bobski, who they just wrecked like a little Danish reek. Just had him sitting there fucking saying, no, you are excellent, Ramsey Bolton. I deserve it because I am Reek. And now he's doing that on desks even to this day, carrying water for these fucks. They wrecked everyone. They weren't cool to anyone. Even Zipniks, who they gave the biggest bag of all time, they then just said, enjoy that bag and take it and sit on the bench, you little bitch. And he had to go and play in the fucking talent team. Then they got Glaive and fired him from his job when it wasn't even necessarily his fault that bad lineup with all academy players failed. And he even had the odd good run like IM Cologne 2022 and stuff like that. But no, he has to get the fuck out too. Legendary Glaive. He can't come back either, by the way. This has to be cadiaN. It can't be Huxley. It can't even be Glaive. Like, bro, this org is so disrespectful. That's the thing. Look how they treat their legends. Then look how they treat their up-and-coming players. Then look how they treat their talent players. By the way, the best talent player Astralis ever had was that guy Zyphon. He was even actually in, I think, Copenhagen Flames a few years ago. Now he's actually pretty good. Now they get to sniff at fucking playing in Astralis, of course. Instead, they bring in Bro, a nobody. Or they bring in the not that good, Altex or some of the ones that aren't even that good from the academy team. These guys don't know what they're doing. But everyone ignores that because it's Astralis and it'll be different different when I'm there. Bro. I know you had problems with her, but with me, maybe it'll be different. I'm a chill guy. Like, they're all just fucking true believers. It's so sad. Because they just wreck everyone. And as a result, though, in a way, you know what? If you're a demon, maybe you deserve to suffer in hell. So I will say, in the same way, fuck the whole Danish scene. They will themselves wreck anyone and anything and say anything and do anything to anyone in exchange to get into Astralis. They'll make any Faustian bargain you need to get into Astralis. Maybe they all deserve each other. In that case, maybe you deserve to get wrecked when you're in Astralis and they're finished. Look, they will pay you loads of money. There's that. But maybe at the end, they need to tell you to go fuck right off. By the way, how about Blame F? How did they treat him? He's the guy that carried their org for a solid couple of years as the only bright spot. Still top player in the world, fragging out to get you the odd place. The second you were sick of him, you role swapped him into a worse role you know he's not good at. By the way, whenever you choose to put someone in a role you know they can't do, it's actually your fault. Because you were responsible for them. You knew they couldn't do that role. You set them up to fail. Then when he failed, you were like, right, fuck off. And then you sold him to shit a fanatic where he has no chance to do anything. That's what you do to the guy who hard carried your club for the last few years. It's fucking gross. That's almost comparable to what Man United did to Ronaldo when he carried them so hard that one season. He made them relevant in Europe again, for fuck's sake. And then they just kept shitting on him. And while they set him up in the team the next season and going, he's not playing defence, and then just fucked him off completely. And probably the best player of all time, standing like a bitch sitting on the bench the whole time. Like, lol, look at that. Look at that. And turned everyone against him. Then let's consider how the pros in general are behaving here. I'm so sick of this childish immaturity. So because you couldn't get along either without Casper Straustown or with cadiaN for a couple of months late last year, you had to have an insane tantrum where you go nuclear option, like, I can't possibly play with him, I'll never play with him. If you make him be my IGL and have all the success I've just had and maybe a top 10 player on HLTV, then I'll quit and I'll leave and I'll go to Astralis, our rival. And then Heroic goes, oh shit, my bad. Well, in that case, I better fucking kick cadiaN, right? I'm going to kick him, there you go. It's like, oh, well, actually, I still want to go to Astralis anyway. Like, I didn't think you'd actually bench him, so I'm just going to go anyway, even though you're now kicking cadiaN and have ruined that and burned that bridge. Like, and then, after all that, less than a year later, you up, cadiaN? You know, I was thinking about the good times. I don't know if you, teehee, remember how it used to be? Not for Heroic, I fucking don't, you little cunt. What are you doing? You're playing God with millions and millions of dollars. Some of that money is the money that, like, they got from the fucking majors. They've had to, like, reinvest that into brand new lineups and sell you to other teams just so you can reform a winning lineup, one of the best synergies in Danish CS for the last 5 years, reform it in their rival team and now potentially beat them and outplace them at events. Thanks, Down. Thanks, mate. Thanks for being mature. All because you either couldn't play with cadiaN or desperately had to be with your true love, Casper Straub. What is it with people called Casper just being cunts? Fit, cadiaN, Straub, whatever. That sounds like a shit lawyer's firm, innit? Fit, cadiaN, Straub. Then how about this? cadiaN, in a sane world where Heroic didn't pull this insane shit, themselves stupidly try and kick him, but also people like Stown just fucked them over and seem like you're holding them over a barrel when you didn't even want that option anyway, and you just thought they wouldn't do it. It was a bluff. Think about what then Stown and Heroic have now done. In a sane world, cadiaN, who's quite old himself and long in the tooth, should be retiring in Heroic fucking colours. He is Heroic. He's Mr. Heroic. The whole thing about the main character syndrome is he's the main character of Heroic. Even if Stown's the better player, we all know it's about cadiaN. Even if in the game they win as a team, we all know it's about cadiaN winning and what trash talk he did and what banter he did with the crowd and what promises he made and what he said in the interview that was so evocative and made us all think about his journey and how they're plucky underdogs and how they're going to best the others and they're going to try so hard. It was all Heroic was a biopic for cadiaN, and now the whack thing is the end of the movie. I don't think it ends this way, but they do. The end of the movie for them is cadiaN goes to your main rival. He joins the fucking Cobra Kai after being with Mr. Miyagi and then wins the State Valley Championship with Cobra Kai. So I haven't even watched like that modern YouTube show. I'm sadly actually such a boomer. I'm going off our references to the 80s movie, The Karate Kid there. Like, you've just gone against everything you fucking stood for. Imagine if you'd actually been able to keep cadiaN and Heroic, by the way. All the options for rebuilds you had. You could have gone and kept Tessus and Shush, and you could have picked from all those other Danish players out there. You could have gotten Blame F when he got kicked out. You could have gone and gotten someone from Gaming Gladiators or TSM, got an ACOR in or something if you want to give up the AWP. I mean, you wouldn't in that scenario. You could have gone and picked out there and rebuilt Heroic again. You're only 2 pieces away. You need a young, skilled, lurkish or rifler. There's plenty of them. And then you need like an aggressive, skilled rifler with a clutch factor like Yabby. These are players you can get, mate. They're out there in the scene. One of them might even be Zyphon. You could have gone out there and got those. One of them might be a config. There's loads of options. The rebuild would have been so quick as a pivot. I think the rebuild could have succeeded before the Astralis team would if they only got Stown and Yabby and they had that mess of a team with Blame F and all the fucking Borup or whatever it was they had at that time. So these people collectively have utterly fucked Heroic. And for what? Just for the glory of Astralis. Great. Let's sacrifice everything in the Danish scene for Astralis. And by the way, in this particular case, I don't think it was 17-dimensional underwater interdimensional battleships by Nicola Nyholm. As far as I've heard, Nicola Nyholm isn't particularly involved with Astralis anymore. This is probably more a Casper Straub move. And also, I'll just throw this out there. The reason why it would be a cool angle if it had have been Nicola Nyholm, because if you don't know, Nicola Nyholm basically invented Heroic. Heroic was one of the orgs, along with Godsent, that him and Refresh made, because the original plan was for Blast to one day be a closed circuit where it'd be Astralis, Godsent, Heroic, a couple of other orgs, and it would be their tournament circuit with their teams, with everything theirs. They would just own their ecosystem. Essentially, Nicola Nyholm wanted to be the demiurge of his own little Gnostic realm, where he would own and control every single aspect of it, and he would be the Dark Lord Sauron with the ring to fucking bind everyone to his malevolence. That's what he was going to try and do. So I have always thought, when it comes to Heroic, there's the same thing with the Hunden thing, and him leaking the fucking Google Doc things, and then him joining as a coach. I've always thought there's a part of Nicola Nyholm that did think, listen, if I can't have Heroic, because obviously you weren't allowed to have multiple team ownership, so you had to give it up. If I can't have Heroic, what I invented, then no one can have Heroic, and I'll destroy it utterly. He was like a vengeful, scorned girlfriend in that sense, who if she can't be with you, because you're not want to be there, she's going to come and kill you with a pistol, be like some fucked up, I don't even know if this is the correct reference, but I'm going to say Elliot Smith or something. Like, if she can't have you, nobody can. And because she's a nutter and bipolar, she has to kill you. I don't even know if that's actually what happened in that case. He was just a guy who did fucking folk music and got shot by someone, wasn't he? I don't know the specifics on that one. But I've always felt like there was that vibe from Nicola Nyholm and Astralis. Like, he is owed to have a Heroic and their players and more success than them. And they are always supposed to be a fucking serf beneath his boot or express fealty to him. Hence why he said all that stupid shit like, hey, cadiaN and all them, come into my office. By the way, how has that aged? Maybe I'll quickly pull up that tweet, shall I? Because that would be funny, wouldn't it? So when the coach bug happened, because Hunden did it against Astralis, even though we have no evidence any of the players in Heroic knew about it, Nicola Nyholm, October 1st, 2020, tagged everyone. He went, yo, Hunden, cadiaN, I don't even know who Askared would be. I'm going to guess one of the players, like maybe it was Refresh or something. Nico, he goes, please come to the office and tell me to my face that players were not aware of the coaching bug exploit. Sickened. And then he put there, I respect coach and players immensely, but you have to be honest here, boys. And then he's blatantly implying, by the way, they knew about this cheating and that's why they won't come and to his face tell him that they did this. Right? One, if you then sign Hunden as your coach, you look like a fucking clown. Two, if you then sign cadiaN as your IGL, you look like a fucking clown. Because these people you are trying to allege or create an atmosphere cheated against you. Cheated against you, bro. Now, admittedly, it wasn't an RMR in this case. It was like DreamHack Masters Spring or something, an online tournament. But even so, you're saying they cheated against you. By the way, they never did do this as far as I know. Come to your office and tell you. But as usual, you can't trust anything Nicola Nyholm says. You can't trust anything he says. Then there's one last detail. And this is mental too, but I'll show you on screen for this one as well, I guess. Because it wouldn't be an Astralis story without some shady ass shit at the end for no good reason, right? So before I could even finish this video, this story came out. Astralis got cadiaN in for the fall final on an emergency sub. Was it against the rules? First of all, shout out to Mira, veteran journalist in Counter-Strike, one of the best of all time, and HLTV for actually being legit and investigating this story. If you don't know, Mira is the main guy who will actually uncover fucked up shit about Astralis and other people, even when you had that whole thing with the betting collective or whatever, where there was like a potential conflict of interest. He's always been legit and done those stories and asked the hard questions, unlike the professors and the fucking gum fucking strikers of the world who were too busy fucking going, oh, hey, Hey, Smooya, on the 17th appearance on HLTV Confirmed, can I give you a hot stone massage and maybe a cup of hot cocoa while you tell me all the bollocks that I know nothing about and I'm not going to ask insightful questions about? So anyway, this story goes, let's go down here. They go, Astralis completed the surprise signing of cadiaN on September 17th. Yeah, keep going. In theory, cadiaN's first event with Astralis would be IEM Rio, considering that the deadline for roster submissions for the Blast 4 final had already passed. But, as he points out, Astralis said in the post themselves that the players' first official matches with the main team will take place at the Blast Premier Fall final. By the way, there's a very obvious reason why. It's in the fucking Royal Arena, isn't it? It's their home arena in Denmark. Of course, you want to unveil him to the fans in front of your home crowd. Problem is, if your roster's full, that would be cheating, wouldn't it? You could only submit the people that were in your roster before the roster deadline. It says here, cadiaN was not part of the roster, so it's not they did it before they just announced the move. He wasn't part of the roster they submitted, or any other team. There's a key part too. It's not like Liquid qualified and he was on Liquid's roster, and so since he's not playing there, he's registered anyway, and you're allowed to take him up. And there's none of that. I mean, I don't even know if that's even the case. So it says here, according to the Blast Premier's rule book, a team's roster must be submitted to Blast at least 3 weeks prior to the applicable tournament stage. Remember, this has actually cost teams the ability to play with their 5-man lineup before. But in this particular, I think so, or I would imagine it was possible it has. But in this case, Astralis, because it's Astralis, they're Danish, they are Danish CS. Blast used to literally, as Refresh, be owned by the company that owned Astralis. The people who used to work for Astralis and Refresh work with Blast now and vice versa. Because of all that insanely incestuous conflict of interest and the remnants of a conflict of interest, magically Astralis gets to have this player though. Funny how that works. It says here, the fall final begins on September 25th, meaning the deadline was September 4th, almost 2 weeks before cadiaN's signing was announced. So why is he allowed to play? Get ready. HLTV learned shortly before Astralis unveiled cadiaN, Blast sent an email to the teams attending the fall final informing them it had approved an emergency addition to Astralis' roster due to a medical emergency. By the way, when there even are players like Device that have had literally medical conditions that have prevented them from playing before, I think the idea you would ever abuse and exploit that rule when the player isn't injured is absolutely shameful, unprofessional, and deserves some sort of disciplinary action from Blast, and or the teams in this community should demand things be done, in my opinion. So the only reason you're getting to have cadiaN is because someone's actually got a medical emergency. Get ready. No further details were provided, and Astralis' announcement made no mention that Alexander Bro, the player who made way for cadiaN, was dealing with any sort of health issues. According to the tournament's rulebook, teams can apply for an emergency replacement after the roster deadline due to illness, injury, and travel disruption. 1, obviously travel's not an issue. They're in Denmark. 2, there's no injury. And then 3, if there's no illness, there's no actual reason based on that rulebook they should be allowed. And it says, and the acceptance or rejection of an emergency replacement will be decided by Blast on a case-by-case basis in its sole discretion. Well, yeah, obviously, what they mean by that is, at the end of the day, we can just violate our own rules if we choose to, which is what they're going to do. They put Blast never publicly stated that Astralis requested an emergency substitution. Get ready. But Bro's agent, Fabian Broish, publicly stated that his client was not dealing, because if you don't know, this agent guy, who's a guy from League, by the way, hates the way that Astralis is treating Bro, and they're sort of cocking him. They didn't even say anything about him in that post. They didn't have to, but I get why he's annoyed by it, because he wants his player to be visible and people to know he's available and that he's a good player and that it wasn't because he's shit or whatever that he got benched. So he put in here, as we represent Bro CS2, teams have reached out to me regarding his health or medical condition because presumably they've heard about this story. Like, well, can we even get him? Isn't he injured? Isn't that why Astralis can't use him? And he's put, because it's important that teams know his player isn't injured, which Astralis is also now fucking Bro by not only using him in a lie to get cadiaN in, I would speculate, but also potentially stopping him getting signed to other people because they think he's fucking injured and can't go to lands. What assholes these guys are. They put, he is fully fine. Obviously, unfortunately, he got benched. Nevertheless, Alex is fully healthy and ready to perform. So feel free to keep reaching out. And then obviously, as I say, he criticised him previously. Absolutely egregious as fuck. Just classic bullshit shenanigans from the guys in Astralis, isn't it? So I think personally, this isn't a good move. I'd like it to work. I wish there was a world, especially I like players. I actually think in their own right, I actually like every player on the Astralis lineup. I think they can be good. I just don't think this is the fit. I don't think philosophically they're going to be on the same page. I wonder about comms and attitude and how they resolve problems. And then I think this is the worst timing ever for the buy-in for cadiaN with where his stock is at. Astralis' stock generally might be low because they haven't had the big wins, but I still think they're not in the position where they want to just start over because cadiaN's starting over if he's not going to be the IGL and the AWP. Everyone needs a support network, and mine is, of course, my Patreon community, the Screwminati, who in many ways, they're the Sonny to my Cher, saying, I got you, babe. So this video and all the others on my channel were kindly supported by the following names: Ahmed Hadjou, Mac Pugnatio Rajcula, Adam Tomlin, Animosity, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Tooorin, and you know it. Jerky's Minion, my main man, always going to be referenced, one of the best patrons of all time. Would you like to ask a question in my AMA? Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest to say on my channel? Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming Reflections and Talk to Thorin interviews are. Maybe you want to do one of those long discussions where you get to set the topics we talk about. Well, if any of these or others appeal to you, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Screwminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.